Hi, this is Michael from MVR Music Lessons, and today I'm going to talk about how to form a minor scale as well as how to find what major scales it relates to. In my last video, I went over how to form a major scale starting on any note by following a pattern. I'll have a link to that video in the description if you haven't seen it yet because it'll help you understand this video much better. To sum it up, the pattern for a major scale using steps was whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. We can use this same pattern to find a minor scale because a minor scale uses the same notes from a major scale. You just start on a different note. If we number the scale steps as 1 through 7, with 8 technically being the octave of 1, the minor scale starts on number 6. When a minor scale uses the same notes as a certain major scale, that minor is the relative minor of the major scale. That might sound a little confusing, so let me simplify what I'm saying with an example. By now, you should be familiar with the notes in C major, since every note is natural in the scale, meaning on the piano, C major is played on all of the white notes. If we go to the 6th note in the scale, we find that it's A natural. This means that A natural minor, or simply A minor, is the relative minor of C major. You can do this with any major scale and find its relative minor. The other way a minor scale can relate to a major scale is if it is the parallel minor. This one is a little more confusing because it doesn't use the same notes as the major scale, but it starts on the same note. To find the parallel minor in C major, we immediately know it will be C minor because we start with the same note. The hard part is finding the scale, because now we need to learn a pattern for a minor scale. To make it as easy as possible, we should realize this minor scale is still the relative minor to a major scale, and that the C we are starting on the minor scale is the 6th note of some major scale. In order to find C minor, we can count up the major scale as if we were starting on the 6th. So we would have a whole step and then a half step. That half step leads us to the note E flat. When talking about scales, if we land on a black key, you should assume for now that the scale is the flat version of that note. So in this case, we're going to use E flat major, not D sharp major. I'll explain more about this in a later video, but for now, just know that you will almost always refer to the black keys by their flat name. So far, we counted up the last few steps in a major scale and landed on E flat, which is the major scale we will use to find C minor. From this point, you should be able to find the major scale by counting up the step pattern we learned in the last video. We do this until we come back to C, which is the note we began on for the major scale. Now we can see the C minor scale, which is the parallel minor to C major. We also know from finding the minor scale that C minor is the relative minor to E flat major. I had a question about C sharp minor on my last video, so I'll explain how this scale is formed and how it relates to major scales, since this relates to what we've been doing so far in this video. If we think of this C sharp as being the 6th of a major scale and count up a whole step, then a half step, we land on E natural. This means C sharp minor is the relative minor to E major. E major sounds a lot less intimidating than C sharp minor, right? That's why finding the relative scales can be so helpful when you're first trying to understand minor scales. So now instead of trying to find C sharp minor, we can just find the rest of the notes in E major up to the next C sharp. So if we start our major scale pattern and count up a whole step, then another whole step, followed by a half step, then another whole step, then we can do one more whole step before we land back on C sharp again. We could keep going to find the scales in higher octaves, but once we've found the 7 notes in the scale, we can easily play those same notes in any octave, so there's no need to keep going. Now we can use the notes in E major to describe and work with C sharp minor. That means all of the same chords you have in E major are in C sharp minor. If you're writing music or talking about the scale, just remember that C sharp is the main note of the minor scale, even though you're thinking of it as E major. To end this video, I'll give you a pattern for finding minor scales just like I did in the major scales video, in case you would prefer to learn a minor pattern instead of finding what major scales relates to the minor. The pattern for a minor scale is similar to the major one since you're just starting in a different place. It's whole, half, whole, whole, half, whole, whole. Alright, that's all for this video. Hopefully that helped you understand how to find a minor scale and how it relates to different major scales. Thanks for watching, and be sure to check out my website in the description, mvrmusiclessons.webs.com. It has all of my videos organized for you so it's easier to follow along. If you like this video, then subscribe and leave a like for more videos in the future. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next lesson.